Welcome to episode 39 of the Mikhaila Peterson podcast. I spoke with Jennette McCurdy in this episode, who I now have a huge crush on. She's an American actor, best known probably for iCarly. She's a songwriter, YouTuber, producer, writer, podcaster. We spoke about her very strange life growing up being a child star and insanely famous, being stressed to death by that, having a very complicated, to say the least, relationship with her mother, dealing with a pretty severe eating disorder, dealing with anxiety, and her current podcast called Empty Inside, which I also recommend checking out. She was really cool. I don't usually get along with girls very well, especially right off the bat, but she was definitely my kind of chick. We spoke about my dad's program self-authoring in quite a bit of detail in the episode. It allows you to organize your mind by writing out your past, present, and future. And because it came up, I got you good folks a code for 15% off if you're interested in checking it out. So that's code MP at selfauthoring.com and 15% off at understandmyself.com as well for Christmas, New Year's, whatever. Code MP. Both of these programs I really do believe in and believe are worth checking out. Understand Myself does an accurate personality test. Self-authoring might be a cool Christmas gift or New Year's, because it kind of allows you to organize your thoughts regarding the future. Again, that's code MP for 15% off at selfauthoring.com and understandmyself.com. Anyway, I hope you enjoy this episode. And if you do, please remember to rate and subscribe. And thank you so much to Jennette for coming on. Jennette McCurdy, welcome to my podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
I'm excited too. We have a bunch to cover. So I'm going to jump right in and start with, you've done a lot with your career. Like, I think you're the same. How old are you? I think you're the same age as me.
28.
Yeah, 28. So you've been, an actress, a singer. You've been on tour. You have your own podcast. That's like a couple of the things. So you've done a lot.
I regret most of those things.
You regret most of those things.
Most
okay.
of them, yes.
Well, we'll definitely get into that. I wanted to start off with, maybe you could give us a bit of a background of who you are and what it is that you do. Brief. We can start there.
Yeah. My mom put me in child acting when I was 6, and by 11, I was successful at it to the point that I was kind of supporting my family. And then by 14, I got like the role that I would say I became most known for on a really popular show called iCarly. And then there was a spinoff from that show that I also did. And then I did a Netflix show after that. So that was kind of my career up to 23. It was all acting. And then my mom actually passed away when I was 21. And that led to an identity crisis of sorts for me, where I was realizing, well, shit, I've been living. Can I cuss on this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I was like, shit, my mom wanted me to be this actress, and that wasn't my dream. And what do I want out of my life? So I quit acting and began pursuing writing and directing, which is what ideally I would like to make a career out of. And that's what I'm pursuing now.
Yeah. So that must have been weird. There's a bunch to get into, but that must have been strange as like a total kid, being the main moneymaker for your family.
Yeah, it was overwhelming, but I also think, looking back on it, like, without being like, oh, I'm trying to find the silver lining, I actually do think it was really helpful for me to learn that kind of work ethic, because knowing that like I had to support the family was a help. Well, like, I don't think I would have had that much drive if I was just like, I want to act, let me have fun. Or like, if fun was the drive, I don't think that's gonna get you to get as good at a thing, as quick at a thing, as if you're like, fuck, I got to put food on the table.
Yeah, that's for sure. So I knew you grew up in a Mormon family too, right?
Oh yeah.
So how did that start? Like, how did your mom get into, putting you into acting, and how did you end up growing to get as big as you are?
I mean, I have complex feelings toward religion. I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts on it overall as well, because it's just, I think it's such a an interesting topic and something that so kind of can be so fun to get into, and why people believe what they believe and how. But my mom, so my grandma grew up in Eureka, Utah, which was like heavy into Mormonism. So I guess she was baptized, but they never went to church, were not active remotely, just baptized Mormon and kind of left it at the door. And then my mom got breast cancer for the first time when I was 2 years old. And all of a sudden we just started going to church all the time. So my sort of harsh judgment toward religion, or at least my family's experience with it, is that my mom just like threw herself at religion as soon as her life wasn't going well in an attempt of like, God, please help me. And then because she did have this miraculous recovery, she had stage 4 metastatic ductal carcinoma. The doctors told her she would not survive, and she did. And I think because of that, she thought, well, it's all because of God. So then she kind of like threw herself even more into religion after her recovery.
Okay, that's really interesting. My mom got diagnosed with like deadly cancer. It was called collecting duct carcinoma. And she was given 8 months. This was a couple of years ago.
Oh my God.
Oh yeah, it was, I mean, you've obviously been there and your mom passed away, but it was like, it was not good. And she miraculously survived, even though everyone said she wasn't going to. And she's found God. So she's become, you know, she was always like, there was always the idea of maybe going to church. And I think I went to church maybe twice as a kid, like, or maybe for a couple of Christmases. So it wasn't a big thing. We were more into, you know, the stories behind the Bible and kind of the philosophy behind it. But
Sure.
more recently, like my mom, I would say, has refound religion or found God. And that really had to do with her recovering miraculously from this cancer. So I get that.
Yeah. Did you have any experience with like rediscovering religion because of her cancer, or is it not that way for you?
No, like she talks to me about it a bit. And, you know, if I get super stressed out or obsessive about something, she's like, you know, it's in God's hands. You know, you don't have to not control everything exactly, but you don't have to control everything, basically.
That gives me more anxiety to be like, it's in God's hands. Like, can we put some shit in my hands?
Kind of. That's kind of how I feel. It's like, I get it. You don't want to ruminate about things you can't control, but,
Sure.
but if you don't do anything and things go badly, like it's a little bit on you at least.
Right. And then I think if you can give God all the credit, does that not also mean you can blame God? It's confusing to me how you're supposed to give him all the credit for all the good things, but then also not blame him for any of the bad.
Yeah, 100%. Right? It also takes away, I find it takes away the credit like for the effort you put in, right? If you try really, really hard and you achieve something and it was like, oh, it was God's will. And it was like, I worked my ass off. Maybe that too. And maybe they work together somehow, but anyway, so I've told my mom I'm not there yet. I might be. She was like gluten-free way before me and so spiritual in other ways. And I find myself as I get older, you know, the gluten-free thing happened and then I've become more spiritual, but I was like, I'm not at that point yet, Mom.
Can you define like what spirituality is for you? That's another thing that I'm like, I'm trying to figure out what my relationship with spirituality is. It's something that I want. It seems very peaceful and lovely, and I'm trying to like work through my relationship with it.
Oh my God, you're turning this podcast around. I'm supposed to be asking you questions.
Oh,
no. No. It's good. I've actually become a lot more, I was really ill, and becoming healthy again was very, I don't really want to say transformative, but I had this one worldview and it was kind of overshadowed with severe depression. And when that went away, it was like breaking free of that. It was a switch. So spirituality, I would say, from being healthier, it changed a lot. And then I've also done a lot of shrooms, and which is like the stereotypical way people become more spiritual. But I mean, if you do enough of that stuff, you learn a lot about yourself, and I saw a lot. And so that's really pushed me in the more spiritual direction, like some of those experiences. So I don't know if that helps you in your relationships, but I would say my spirituality probably comes from high doses of mushrooms.
Yeah, the takeaway shrooms. I hope if we ever hang out in person, maybe you'll be the first person that I do shrooms around.
Oh my God, I would be down for that. Those are crazy things. You have to be ready, and you have to be with people you know and trust. Because if you go to a party, you don't know anyone there, and you do something like shrooms, like That is a recipe for disaster.
It sounds terrifying.
Yeah, it is. It can be. So I don't know very much about Mormonism. And by very much, I mean basically nothing. So can you give me a brief background about what that religion is? Because I feel like sometimes it's equated with other religions that it shouldn't be.
Sure. Yeah, I think that the like classic idea that people tend to conjure up when they hear the word Mormon is like people with bonnets working in fields of hay with 8 wives. Latter-day Saints, like modern Mormonism is not that at all. In the past, that was like an old custom, I guess, to try and get more kids out there, they say. Sure. But now it's like, it's very much, you marry one person, you get married quite young, and you have as many kids as you possibly can. And then it's a lot of like basic Christianity, basic Christian principles. I would just say it's like heightened. And then there were a lot more rules that go with it. Like you can't have caffeine, you can't have hot beverages, you can't buy anything on Sundays. There's just like 1.5 million rules that are very hard to remember and even harder to stand by. Yeah.
Well, so if you can't have caffeine, that would be no to alcohol.
Absolutely no alcohol. Yeah. No, no tattoos. No, you have to wear garments under your clothes every day. I don't know there's like reasons behind all of it that I don't remember. I just remember all the rules because growing up with an anxiety disorder, it gave me a lot of anxiety to be like, oh shit, how am I going to do all this and not do that? And blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Okay. So how did somebody, so say your mom, because you said your mom kind of pushed you into acting. How did that work with being a Mormon?
That's a good question. Not well. But my mom my mom was the master of finding justifications for the things that she wanted to be a certain way. For example, like it was really shunned on in the church when I played a child prostitute. Like no, Sister Huffmeyer wasn't having it. But my mom would come to church and like have this testimony speech written where she would then go stand up on the stage and talk about how like this is actually a really good thing for the church because it might lead to prostitutes hearing the whisper of the Holy Ghost. If they see this and they know that Jennette's Mormon, like they might convert as well. That was the level of like extreme that my mom would take it. And somehow, like looking back on it now, it seems ridiculous and absurd and over the top. But at the time, she would somehow like persuade people that that was reality and that that was a good thing. Like she had a really charming kind of side to her personality, even though she was saying insane things most of the time.
Wow. Sounds like she might have been a smart cookie to weave those kind of things together.
You know, she had a capacity for intelligence and I feel like it was wasted and I feel like she didn't really use it for good and it upsets me.
Aw, that's too bad.
Yeah.
So you have just going off of that, you have this tour you don't have the tour anymore, obviously, COVID. But you were on tour and you were doing a 1-woman show.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So what was that about?
I'm glad you were referring to this tour. I thought you were talking about when I had a brief stint doing country music and I did a mall tour and I thought you were talking about the mall
I kind
tour.
of wish I was. I watched one of those videos. I watched a video on YouTube of a 2011. It was fantastic. It was so 2000s. Oh, it was great though.
I'm mortified. Oh God.
No, I liked it. It was like, it kind of reminded me of Avril Lavigne or something. Just like, it's been a while since 2000 since the early 2000s.
Yeah, it feels like it's been forever.
Yeah, this year has been forever.
But you're coming. It looks like you're coming back. The little loader's there. There you are. So this tour, yeah, I was doing a tour for my 1-woman show. I was just about to go to New York for it, and I was super excited. That's sort of the place you want to go if you're doing a 1-person show. And then just, I think a week before I was supposed to go, COVID happened and everything was shut down. I'm really hopeful that I get to do it soon. Things are looking more promising than they have, I think, for a long time. So we'll see.
And was that music? What was that?
It was a dark comedy musical 1-woman show called I'm Glad My Mom Died. And it's sort of about a lot of this material that we're actually talking about today, like my mom's influence on my life and how she really lived vicariously through me. And I felt a complete responsibility to live my life for her, which I'm sure was enhanced by the guilt that I had about her cancer and everything. And then once she passed away, it was kind of me rediscovering or discovering my own identity for the first time, and not the one that she gave to me, and not the one that she wanted for me.
Yeah, that's an intense story. Was there anything good? Like I want to get into the bad parts about being in the public eye when you're little, because it can destroy people. Like you see it from the sidelines. So what were the good parts? It's a long pause.
A moment of silence. The good parts were, I think it did teach me a good work ethic. I think, I don't have to be asked twice to do anything. I think I'm really self-motivated and driven. And then I made some good friends. I made some really good friends. And also, you know what? I think there's more. I think it's like what I'm doing now, writing and directing is adjacent, and I don't know what I would have done otherwise. So who's to say? But I do think that it's helpful to have, I already kind of have a somewhat of a running start on this career, because I know the industry kind of works somewhat like this, although it's very different as an actor. Because as an actor, everybody kind of babies you and treats you like, oh, they can't know anything because they're sensitive, and like nobody tells you anything. So it's sort of like it's definitely a more narrow point of view, I think, to be an actor in the entertainment industry, but it's also adjacent. I think it was helpful in terms of like switching to the career that I wanted to switch to.
Yeah, so that's fair. What about the bad parts? That sounds easier.
It certainly is. Bad parts. I mean, there's a lot of abuse that happens. I worked with an incredibly emotionally abusive producer. Even talking about it now, my face gets hot thinking of it, just because, he'd say things like, you guys will work at Yogurtland if you didn't work for me. And he would just scream.
How old were you?
I was, when I started the show, I was 13.
Does Yogurtland even hire people when they're 13? Is that even a reasonable thing to say?
The real questions. Thank you. Exactly. It's like, he was like a comically, like the bad teacher or whatever you would expect in like an over the top broad family comedy. That's what he seemed like, very villainous and almost like mustache twirly in his kind of personality. So there's just like, there's abuse, which is a very on the nose bad. And then there's also, I think it leads to a sense of entitlement, where it's like, if you have so much at a young age, you think that that's reality. Like my reality when I was 13 was that everybody cared what I had to say. My reality when I was 13 was that like people were interested in me just because I was on TV, not because I had interesting things to say, not because I was saying anything of merit or value. And I think it leads, or for me, I should say, it definitely led to this idea of like, well, things will just keep working out. It's like you don't have to try as hard and formulate your own opinions and your own point of view as much, because you just think, well, if I post this picture and it gets 500,000 likes, I must be great. It's like, let's tone it down. You're not that great, sweetheart. Let's get some garner some interesting things to say.
But I mean, that's got to be difficult to understand if you have a whole bunch of people watching you or recognizing you. I mean, when you went out on the street, you got approached, right?
I mean, it got to a level that was so intense. It would just, there's paparazzi and like clusters of people anywhere that's like a public, a restaurant, like can't eat without people constantly there. It for me, it was really frustrating. I think for some people they can kind of, I don't think anybody's made for fame. Like, I don't think that there's anybody who's made to thrive in it, but I think there are some people that are more able to tolerate it. And are just like better equipped with their emotional and mental tools to handle it. And I don't think I was. And it just made me feel like I was going to explode all the time. I was so anxious.
Yeah. Well, having an anxiety disorder and then being approached all the time and being recognized everywhere sounds anxiety provoking.
Right. Not a recipe for success.
No. And I know that, I remember, I think it was Eminem. He came out with something and he got really angry at being approached at a restaurant or something. And me as a kid, I was just like, well, like that's kind of what you get for being in the pub. Like, I think there's a level of, don't want to say like resentment or anger for people looking in, but they're kind of like, well, you're a celebrity. Like, what do you expect? And then I know I've noticed through mainly being around my dad and I'm not putting any negativity there because most people who approach him are really kind and it's been overwhelmingly positive, but it's still like, you know, sometimes when you're having dinner, it's like, I just want to have dinner. So
sure.
It's weird. It's a weird situation.
Well, I'm curious about that too, because like with, you know, your dad specifically, but I would imagine like, I mean, he's changed my life. I've done his self-authoring suite 3 times. I do it at the start of every year. Oh my God. I have given it as a gift to everybody that I know. I just think it's so helpful in terms of like getting you in check with yourself. And it's the most realistic approach to like accomplishing your goals and getting your life on track that I've ever seen. It's like, why would, you know what I mean? Why was I want everybody I know to do it.
Oh, that's cool to hear.
Yeah, I think it's so helpful. But so I would imagine like if I saw your dad on the street or something, I would be approaching him for this thing that he's made, this thing that he's done. I resented fame. I really did, because it was like people were coming at me constantly for a thing that I was ashamed to be a part of. You know, I was on a show that I thought was trash. Like I just thought, this is so shitty. This is so bad. I don't want to go onto this overlit kids show set and like scream my lines and just like, whoa, Carly, like everything just felt just so ridiculous. So for me, it was like when people were constantly approaching me, it just felt like, God, about this dumb piece of trash that I don't even like. Why is this the big thing? Like, it just felt so, I mean, I know that's super, I think it's a super unlikable thing to say, but it really is my experience.
No,
and,
it's just,
you know,
it's just kind of sad, right? I think I kind of get where you're coming from too, because for an actor too, you're portraying people who you aren't. So then you might be approached, I don't know, but you might be approached on the street from someone who treats you like the character you're portraying, whereas somebody like Dad wouldn't exactly have that happen.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, yeah, people would come up to me. I played like kind of a punky teen on TV, a girl who had been to juvie. And at the time I was like 14, but seemed more like a 7-year-old emotionally. Like I was very emotionally underdeveloped. So people are coming up to me being like, hey, Sam, like, and I'm going, hi, like just a nervous wreck. And they're like, oh, you're not cool. Never mind.
Aw, man. That's sad.
That's all right.
That's all right. I did self-authoring once. It takes a lot of self-discipline, I would say, to go through the exercises, because they're not fun per se, and they're not frilly. So to hear you've done it 3 times, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I literally have my filled out ones in my drawer in front of me because I read them frequently so that I stay on track. I mean, I take it very seriously. That's
such a good idea. So what are your goals then? What do you want to do?
I think I've done a pretty good job. My last ones were like write a play was my first one. I wrote a play, didn't do anything with it. Didn't like it. Better regulate jealousy, anger, and fear. That was a huge one.
That's hard.
I've come so far with that. Like they were really fucking hard emotions for me to regulate before. I just didn't know how to handle them. And I've taken a lot of actions, therapy and whatnot to try and get better at them. And I've worked really hard.
Wow. So how did you manage that? Those are hard. I think those are hard emotions for anybody to regulate.
Yeah. I started a therapy called DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy. And that's very specific to, it's a very like pen and paper therapy. And you, I don't really know how to explain it if you don't know it, but they give you literally like a 400-page textbook when you first start to kind of try to learn. And that doesn't mean, of course, that like I have jealousy, anger, and fear every single day. I probably struggle the most with fear or anxiety. And they're still really difficult, but I no longer like do behaviors that are detrimental to myself or my life because of those emotions. Now it's like I feel them and they're painful and I don't enjoy the experience of jealousy or anger or fear at all, but at least I'm not making my life worse when I have them.
Wow. Okay.
Does that make sense? I don't know.
Yeah, it does. Okay. It does. I would say I probably have the hardest time with, I'm fairly volatile. Have you done the personality test at Understand Myself?
No.
Okay, so I'm obsessed with this test, and it's not because my dad made the test. I love it. I used to give it to people that I wanted to date to judge them before I'd go on a date with them as like a 19-year-old. But it gives you a pretty thorough breakdown of your personality traits according to the Big Five. And it's accurate, so it's fun if you want to check it out. Or I'll send you a link afterwards. It's really interesting. But I'm quite volatile I had a extremely severe depression, technically bipolar type 2. So I get the anxiety and depression part, and I still have lingering volatility just because I'm not very stress tolerant. Like I'm doing good, but if something bugs me and I'm stressed, then I just like fire off, which isn't ideal, but sometimes it's entertaining, hopefully, for me.
No, I mean, that's exactly what I'm talking about. It's like I had such a difficulty with emotions that I would do things that were just like, I mean, it was awful for myself, for my life, for people that I love. It's like, it was not an adult way to behave. And it was really, I think, painful for people around me and for myself. It was really bad.
Are you being too hard on yourself though? Like how old were you when you had these troubles?
The shittiest years of my life, I was a fucking monster of a person from 21 to 24.
I would say that's pretty young still, right? Like especially 21 to 23. I mean, I don't think prefrontal cortexes are fully developed in women until 23 or 24. So you're literally missing part of your brain. Seriously. And for men, it's even a little bit later. So if you're just like, why does this guy only have half a brain when he's 25? It's because he kind of does.
I mean, it's nice to, I feel like I can't write it off though. Like I definitely did think, because even though I was 21, even though my brain was not fully developed, I still caused pain. I was still cheating on people that I loved just because like, oh, I need attention. It's like, fucking grow up, you piece of trash. That's how like, why could I not resolve a conflict? Why could I not communicate my feelings? Oh, I'm feeling lonely. Oh, I'm feeling whatever. Why did I have to resort to cheating? And like, what a slimy bitch.
I still think you're being too hard on yourself. I had a pretty terrible time as like a teenager up till the time I actually got healthier and changed my diet and was less ill. I did things that I'm not proud of, but I can kind of look back on that and think, if it's not something you would do again, you probably need more shrooms. One of the things they're really good at, and seriously, is they're good at giving you an outside perspective on your own life and giving yourself forgiveness. Right? Like that's one of the things they've really, if you're feeling guilty for things you've done and you're just carrying that guilt, it does give you a bird's eye view and you go, oh man, like she's had a really hard time. She's trying really hard. Like you should give her a break kind of from the outside. It's really helpful for that.
Wow. I have no concept of it. So you got to walk me through this, how it gets to self-forgiveness.
Honestly, I don't even know how to describe it without doing it. Like I tried when my husband and I first started dating, I went to who was talking? Dennis McKenna was doing a talk on shrooms. I think my dad was talking or something, or he went there and I brought Andre along, and Dennis McKenna said, people describe a shrooms trip as life-changing or one of the most life-changing experiences of their life. And Andre kind of scoffed, and I was like, you just don't get it because you haven't done it. But it opens, like one of the things it does is your brain filters a lot of information. So if you're listening to someone talk, you don't hear the voices around them very well. It kind of removes all those filters. So what it feels like is you're experiencing what reality should be without filters. That's one way to describe it. And if you do enough of them, like you learn a lot about yourself that you're holding back. Like one of the experiences I had that was really life-changing was I looked at every relationship in my life, and there's a lot of relationships there, right? People you meet online, like there's a lot. And I got told how I was contributing negatively to those relationships. It was just like, boom, reality. So I recommend, especially if you need to, like, if you're hard on yourself, and you shouldn't necessarily be, because I get where you're coming from for being like a young person and being shitty, because I've been there, but you were young. And if you're not like that anymore, then it shouldn't be something you're raking yourself over the coals for, in my opinion.
That's really nice. Can I ask, what do you mean when you said, like, when you say shitty, what kind of things?
Well, relationships, not being faithful, lying. I drank way too much.
Oh, same.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And that's not good. And the thing is, there's got to be some sort of like compassion for that kind of thing too, because it's really hard on that person, right? Like if somebody's abusing alcohol or cheating on people or sleeping around, that's really hard on that person. So they shouldn't just be like raked over the coals for doing those things, because it's not like they're having a good time. Right?
Right.
Yes.
Having a terrible time.
They're having a terrible time, and that's why they're doing those things. Okay, so you had, let's do another fun topic. You've spoken a bit about, and I've read some articles about your experience having an eating disorder. So what did that stem from? How did you manage to get that under control? What was that like?
That stemmed from my mom, another surprise, mommy, she's back. When I was 11, I played a lot of roles on TV that were like for younger, like I played 7 or 8 because I was very small. And one day I felt like a lump in my breast, and I was very scared. I thought like, oh my God, my mom had cancer. Now I have cancer. I'm only 11. How can I have cancer? And I go to my mom, I'm like terrified. And she goes, oh no, you don't have cancer. You're just developing breasts. And the only thing that would have been worse for me at that time than like hearing that I had cancer was hearing that I was going to have breasts, because growing up meant that I would not be able to pay my family's bills. My mom was always very vocal about like, it's good when you play younger roles. Who knows what your career will be like once you can't play these younger roles. Like we need to get you on a hot streak while you're prepubescent, that kind of talk.
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, I said, okay, well, what can I do to not have boobs? And my mom said, well, there's this thing called calorie restriction, which is anorexia. And we it really felt to me like we were in a buddy comedy, like doing the hand jives and then like eating 400 calories a day. Like it felt like the happy montage in a movie, only it was this very sick and disturbing situation that I wasn't aware of because I was a child. I wasn't aware that my mom was teaching me anorexia. You know, she gave me stacks of diet books. She weighed me. She measured my thighs with a measuring tape to make sure that they weren't bigger than previous weeks, like very intense stuff. And I just thought this was normal. And when she would tell me not to tell my friends, I thought it's because we have such a special relationship. It's not because she's doing anything bad. It's because like, yeah, other girls wouldn't get it because their relations with their moms are just like weak. We're golden. So that was where that started. And then I've been through all the eating disorders. So anorexia for me was 11 to 15. And then my eating kind of like normalized. I don't really have a reason for why. I was on a show at that time, so maybe it was just like knowing that I had kind of reached the goal. There was no longer a career goal in my mind. And then by 16, I got my period. I was very late to get my period, and then I went back to anorexia because I was so terrified of growing up again. And then by 18, when my mom was diagnosed with cancer, I had binge eating disorder. By 21, the year that she died, I had anorexia and then bulimia for 3 years, and that is the end of that. Like that was the end of my my eating disorder history.
That sounds unpleasant.
In a word, yeah, totally.
Okay, so how are you doing now? And did you get it under control? And how did you manage that?
It's another thing that I attribute to DBT, that type of therapy that I mentioned earlier. I really think that specific type of therapy changed my life.
I've never heard of that.
Yeah, I think CBT is definitely talked about, cognitive behavioral, and it's like talk therapy is amazing. And I think really like for me now, that's the game but DBT was really needed for like the extent of the issues that I had. I just don't think they could have been resolved by anything less. I needed to be a part of the program. Is you also have coach calls, which is where you're able to call your therapist any hour of the day or night when you're dealing with your issues most. for something like bulimia, when that's a behavior that you need to really be on top of. Like the amount of time that I was calling my therapist to be like, I want to throw up. I mean, it's crazy. It's impossible to achieve that level of like contact with the therapist in any other type of therapy.
Interesting. I've had a bit of experience with therapy. Well, actually, that's not true. I've had extensive experience with therapy.
Which kinds?
I don't like, there was never a name. I would say it was probably cognitive behavioral therapy, but a lot of it was just talking, and it was a disaster every single time.
What do you mean?
Oh my God. So my first experience was with this poor woman. I was really sick as a kid. So I went to see, her name was Dr. Lefebvre, but people called her Dr. Froggy, and she had frogs all over her office. And
this was already a problem. Yeah. This is already not going to work.
This poor woman, she dealt with kids with physical disabilities, basically. And I had arthritis rather severely, so I was in that category, but I was medicated well enough that I wasn't in the category of kids with severe physical disabilities. Like whenever I went in there, it was kids in wheelchairs. So I was actually less troubled than most of her patients. And then her husband got brain cancer, and she just broke. And this was right when I was seeing her. So she ended up talking to me. So which wasn't great for like grade 6. So that was the first experience. I was like, I can't go in there. Like, her husband's dying of brain cancer. It was horrible. So that was the first experience. And then, man, there was like one therapist that suggested when you go to a therapist, they're not supposed to say things, right? Because you're very susceptible when you're talking to people. So if they suggest things, you have to be careful because they can create false memories. And this is a huge thing that happens. So I had one, and this was after I had my hip and ankle replacement. And she got into like, if my dad had been inappropriate towards me as a child. And I was 18 at this point, and I was like, you can't just ask those questions when I'm in therapy. There was no leading up to that. Like, where did that come from? So then there was that lady. And then there was another one that just cried after I told her like my hip and ankle replacement. She just cried. And I was like, well, I'm not going to go see that one. So I haven't had very much success. I've had a lot of success, like writing down things that I can't get out of my head and just getting them out on paper. So I did a ton of journaling and writing and writing and writing. And that was very therapeutic for like traumatic experiences.
Your therapy experiences sound awful and hilarious.
They're so good when they're written down. Like I'm writing a book, and they're very good for the book, but for real life, they were not ideal.
Right. Such is life. I feel like anything that's not like a fun life experience, it's like, well, I better write a book because otherwise this shit was just life. Nah.
Yeah, it's less fun that way. If I ever have something terrible happen, I'm like, oh, it's going to make a good chapter though.
Exactly. Yeah. I agree though that I think writing helps tremendously. I think that's maybe even more so than DBT. I would say like journaling, again, your dad's self-authoring suite, but like just any form of writing in a really complete way. I was going to say word vomity way, but considering my past, maybe not the best.
It's a nice way to describe it. Kind of though.
A little.
Yeah. That's kind of accurate.
If I'm not going to vomit, I might as well word vomit.
Oh my God. Wow. Well, good for you for like getting all that under control. I'm sure being under extreme stress as a kid, like is just going to breed that kind of behavior, right? Yeah.
Actually saying it now, I also think that quitting acting was hugely instrumental. Like I needed that for my mental health, and I needed that for my own self-growth and my own relationship with myself. I couldn't keep literally being people that other people write, and, trying to just the amount of rejection that comes with acting, the amount of like wedging yourself into these roles that are other people. It's like, no, I deserve to be myself, man. Like it's been enough of being other people, enough of spending my life trying to be who my mom wants me to be in producers and record labels. And like, I'm done. And I think walking away from that, it was certainly the hardest thing, or one of the hardest things I've ever done. The kicking the eating disorder was harder, but but walking away from a career that everybody's telling everybody in my family is going, don't walk away from this. You'd be insane to walk away from this. You can't. Why would you do that? Do you know how hard it is to be successful at acting? What are you thinking? And I was like, I don't know. I feel like I have to do it. And it was really hard, but it was me kind of taking a stand for myself. And I'm really glad that I did it.
Yeah, that is hard because it's like, there's so much opportunity there. It's like, how can you say, and especially if you're a driven person, and how do you say no to that? That's hard.
Yeah. And also because of the influence of everybody around. I mean, nobody was like backing at my decision to walk away. Nobody was saying like, cool, doing a thing for yourself. Good on you. Everybody was like, keep acting, be a star. They all sound like agents for some reason.
They were all my agents. Yeah. That's great. Okay. It's interesting. Let me see. I asked Instagram questions. But I didn't find, no offense to anybody who asked questions, but they didn't have that many interesting questions. So I kind of wanted to get into other things. You have a podcast, Empty Inside. How did you name that? Why did you name it that?
There actually is a song in my one-woman show called Empty Inside. It's a song about my mom teaching me anorexia. And I liked that title a lot. And I thought that it was really appropriate to name it Empty Inside, since I'm kind of talking about the opposite of that, which is ways to find fulfillment. And ideally through talking about like uncomfortable topics, because I think there's no way to get to any level of fulfillment if you're talking about surface stuff, if you're talking about just the sound bites or the press tour answers. You know, you got to get to someplace real, ideally with whoever you're talking to, in order to find a connection and fulfillment.
Yeah, man, that's kind of what I'm trying to do.
Right. Yeah. I really gravitated to your podcast because I was like, okay, she's doing it. She's doing the thing.
That's so nice.
Yeah.
So you managed to, okay, you said you're trying to work on your relationships, right? Are you in a relationship, like romantically?
I am. I am in a happy relationship of 4.5 years. And I actually just gifted my boyfriend's sister the self-authoring suite to bring it on back. Oh my God. Yeah. She loved it. And she's now in college. Like, it motivated her to sign up for online college. She was a ballerina. She has a really interesting story. She was a ballerina and her whole company shut down, like a professional ballerina, and her whole company shut down because of COVID. And she was like, fuck, what am I going to do?
Oh my God. Yeah.
So I sent her self-authoring suite and she was like, okay, I'm going to apply what I know and sign up for some online college.
That's so cool. Yeah. If anyone listening doesn't know about it, it just kind of helps you go through your head and figure out what you want and then right steps guiding you towards that.
In the least fluffy way possible. I've read so many I certainly went through like a self-help book phase, a much regretted self-help book phase. And all of them were just like, what the fuck? They're like, keep your chin up. It's like, how is my chin up
that's so helpful?
Right? Like how is that going to help anything? Keeping my chin up is going to write a book? Cool. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Right?
Be positive.
But he makes it so that you actually have to answer hard questions for yourself. One of my fucking favorites is that he goes, what would happen if you didn't do these things? Describe the worst case scenario.
It's horrifying.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
But necessary. You have to see both sides of it. You can't just be pursuing goals like, I'm on my happy, like you're denying reality if you're just pretending like you're going to achieve every goal that you want by just waving your magic wand at it.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. And it shows my favorite part, actually, probably that part is he gets you to list out what your kind of bad habits are. And then what would happen if that's what you did? And then you see your future if you, like for mine, I did mine when I was quite a bit younger. So I was drinking a lot. So that was my major one. And it was like, if you're drinking, you're hungover or you make bad decisions when you're drunk. So it gets you to look, I think it's 10 years into the future if you continue doing your bad habits, and it gives you this horrifyingly ugly picture, which is quite encouraging for stopping those habits. It is pretty handy.
100%.
Yeah. So can I ask you who your favorite guests are? How do you pick your guests?
It's all through just like personal interest. If I think like, oh, this person, I like what this person's work. First, it's like if I like the person's work. And then second, if I think the person is open and willing to be kind of vulnerable. Cause I think, there's just a lot of people who are kind of more closed off and that's, that's cool, but I don't know how to have a conversation with that. Those are really just my two check boxes.
Yeah, that's fair. That's how I've been choosing guests like half if I find them an interesting person that I just want to talk to.
Yeah.
Or if I think that they're like some people are misconstrued or you have a different idea of who they are than they actually are. So trying to grab some of those people, and then I do like health experts to keep the health aspect going, because it's been so transformative for me. I want to shine more of a light on that stuff, like alternative health stuff.
I love the idea of finding people who the public kind of perceives one way and showing them in a different light. That's really interesting.
Yeah. And you must have experienced that fairly dramatically. Like I've had a taste of these things, but you were totally thrown into the spotlight. So it's interesting speaking to you. Do you have suggestions for people who are like, there was quite a bit of interest in the eating disorder part, because that's something people sometimes don't talk. Well, if they're actually suffering from it, they won't talk about it because it's embarrassing and all these things. So are there suggestions you have to people who are battling that kind of thing?
Yeah. I mean, I hate how expensive therapy is. It's really upsetting to me how it's just like so not accessible for most people. Like, okay, you're going to charge people $200 a session. Like, what are we talking about here in the US? So I would say if you can get your hands on the DBT workbook, it's better than nothing. It's ideal to have a therapist kind of walk you through it. But if you don't have that, I think that the book itself, the handbook itself, is at least somewhat helpful. And then of course, journaling is huge. And I've never heard the word trigger warning thrown around so much as in the eating disorder community, but I think that sensitivity is actually really counterproductive. Like, I don't think that you can just go, oh, I'm not going to hear, oh, somebody's talking about a burrito, I'm not going to listen, and hope to get better. Like, I think you have to hear thoughtful conversations about eating disorders and about people who have had eating disorders, the good, the bad, and the ugly. You can't deny that there's some sort of positive reinforcement from having one, or like nobody would have an eating disorder if there wasn't some positive reinforcement to them, right? So you can't just pretend like it's this ugly, big, bad wolf. And then I think that you have to acknowledge the bad as well, so that you really know what your future is going to be like if you continue down the path.
Yeah. There are a lot of triggers, speaking of trigger warnings and where you wouldn't necessarily expect them. I had a kid when I was like fairly young nowadays, so 24, and I joined a couple of mothers groups because I was like, I need some mom friends. All my friends are drinking. And there were so many trigger warnings. You couldn't communicate with anyone. Like, you weren't allowed to post anything about renovating. This is what got me. And I was like, okay, I need a different way to find friends. You couldn't post anything about renovating because you needed a trigger warning first. Like, I got in trouble for asking about renovations because it was triggering to people who couldn't afford renovations.
Oh,
I was like,
my God. At what point? Yeah.
At least with something like an eating disorder, like a lot of the people who have one are going to be pretty, for lack of a better word, neurotic. Like, a lot of people with any type of health problem are neurotic. So at least with the trigger warnings there, it's like, you know, people could say you're not trying to not trigger a binge or something. So I've got some compassion there, but yeah, you need some sort of exposure therapy, right? Because you're talking about being able to listen to these conversations and things without being worried that it's going to make you sick, right?
That's exactly it. 100%. I think of course there's compassion there for I mean, the nature of eating disorders, they're brutal, but also, yeah, I think if you can't hear conversations about it, there's no hope. You got to face the reality of it, good, bad, and ugly. And also, there's a book called Intuitive Eating that was really helpful.
I've heard about that.
It's really great.
Does that tell you what to eat, or just like, how does that work?
Doesn't go into what at all. It's just about going back to the kind of almost like a child's point of view toward food, where it's like you eat when you're hungry, and you stop when you're full, and you eat, 3 meals a day. Like, your parents aren't going to let you go by not eating a meal. So you gotta make sure that you stay on top of eating 3 times a day. And it sounds so basic saying that kind of overall premise of the book, but it really breaks it down in such a way that's like, oh, you can kind of start to unlearn your patterns and for me, it was like being re-exposed to, oh, this is what like normal eating is. And also this, like, I'm rambling because I care very much about like helping in any way that I can people with eating disorders. I just think there's such a waste of time. I think they take so much potential out of people, and it's like heartbreaking to me that there's all these people out there who could be so much more, but they're just wasting their time on this addiction that's like defeating that. It's just it's so bothersome. But not having any food rules, I think, is really important as well. If there's anything you can do, because as soon as you got one rule, oh, I'm just gonna do unless you have to for health reasons, of course, or just a conversation to have with your doctor. But for me, it was like, as soon as I had one food rule, then I had 100, and then I was just, oh, well, it's just lettuce. Cool, great. It's a very slippery slope.
Yeah, I see that. I was on SSRIs for a very long time, and they made me I didn't know at the time until I stopped taking them, but they made me excessively hungry. Like, I felt like I was starving all the time. And I actually managed to get that. Well, not taking the drug really helped. But I found managing my appetite, becoming more restrictive, actually worked for me. I didn't do it for, I didn't have an eating disorder. I don't think I would qualify it as that, but it definitely managed my hunger better. I think, not eating so many tasty things, because I had like zero self-control. I don't know if anyone has very good self-control around like Cinnamon Toast Crunch, but it helped cutting those things for me.
So interesting. I've looked into like your story quite a bit, and seeing your kind of history with health and your health journey. It's so the opposite of what mine is. Like, it's the things that are literal like no's for eating disorders.
I know.
And I think that's important to understand, because I think that can be confusing for people. They're like, well, wait a second. How come can't I cut out a thing? Can't I whatever? And it's like, well, it's different if there's eating disorders involved than what might actually be good for you if it's just like a health necessity.
Yeah. I think the best way to handle these things, I've got a couple of Facebook groups and support groups for people going through like chronic illnesses. And I've had people with eating disorders recover, but I think that also might have something to do with nutrient malabsorption problems, because I think there's something there too. So I think the eating disorders, from stress, extreme stress, or are in a different category than people who have an eating disorder because they're having malabsorption problems. And generally, you really have to figure out what's good for your own body, right? Like, you really have to. I think what really got me healthy was I started listening to what my body was saying, and I'd been ignoring it. And so maybe the intuitive eating thing, maybe it was partly just teaching yourself, pay attention to what's going on inside. Pay attention to when you're hungry. Pay attention 100%. To when you're not hungry, right? Like, and that's really hard. Lots of people lose track of that. Like, even people who wouldn't say they have an eating disorder, a lot of people lose track of when they're full, even when they're hungry. Yeah. So
it's like you kind of rob yourself of your body cues. You're so used to the addictive thinking that there's no genuine body awareness. Or for me, there was absolutely none.
Yeah, I had an issue with, because I'd been in pain for a lot of my life, I was ignoring some of these things. Or if you're, cripplingly depressed, then you kind of ignore, you learn to ignore cues, especially if you're told to, that it's the right thing to do. It's like, oh, that's not important. Excessive daytime sleepiness. Oh, it's normal. Everybody has it. So you kind of put that into the category of things that you ignore. And then by the time I was like 23, I had like 16 health symptoms that I was ignoring. So what, other than your podcast, you said you wrapped up season 1, you're working on season 2, and you said you wanted to get into directing. So what's your plan for the future?
I've directed so many short films in the past, and now I'm working on features. I've done the whole like film festival thing and done that whole spiel, but now I'm writing 2 features and hoping, fingers crossed, hoping to do something with those. And then the one woman show I'd love to get back to whenever possible. I imagine relatively soon.
Yeah, I'm thinking next summer.
Right? That seems promising. That's kind of what I'm aiming for.
Yeah, that's my guess.
I'd love to for like professional and personal reasons. It's just like such a personal story, and talking about that, like I yearn for that closure of doing it again, and like having there's something about like art that's just like, okay, I can put an end to this thing that there is really no end to. And it's such a nebulous, like life, weird trauma thing that like I can at least find the story in it and move on from it in as much as I can by doing that thing. And so I look forward to doing it again for that reason.
Yeah, I get that. I told you this book I've been working on, and it has a whole bunch of like, being chronically ill is totally traumatizing. You're aware of that. Like, so there's a lot, and it's nice to kind of, like you said, put an end to it. And art does allow you to do that kind of thing. For me, it's this book, but performance too.
When is your book coming out? I'm so excited.
Oh my God. I'm hoping late next year.
Awesome.
We'll see. That's what I'm hoping. But I will definitely be letting everybody know. Thank you so much for coming on. It was very nice to meet you.
Thanks for having me. I enjoy talking to you so much. I really, really enjoy our conversations.
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit, I don't know, like, not to be insulting, I'm a bit surprised. I don't usually, get along with people too easily. Surprising. Is that surprising? I don't know how surprising that is, but I don't. So that was very fun. Where can people find you online other than just typing in Jennette McCurdy?
Yeah, my website's JennetteMcCurdy.com, but my name's spelled weird to the point that like my uncle still misspells it. So I'll spell it out. It's JENNETTEMCCURDY. JennetteMcCurdy.com takes it to everything, but I'm also on every social media platform there is. I won't name them because the list is too long at this point. There's like 12 of them. Can't keep up.
There's a lot. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much for coming on, and we'll keep in touch for sure.
Great. I'll hope to see you someday in person to do those shrooms.
Definitely.
All right. Bye.
Thanks for watching. Remember to rate and subscribe if you enjoyed the episode. And remember to use code MP for 15% off at selfauthoring.com and understandmyself.com. Thanks for watching.